Are you just starting out in ESO and you want to know a realistic and reasonably fast way to make your first million coins? Well, that's exactly what we're going to look at in this video. So there are fundamentally 3 ways you can make money in this game, okay? So one is going to be active money making. This is where you're actively doing an activity like harvesting materials or running a dungeon, things like this. The second method is going to be passive money makers. This is like listing some crafted armor you might have made in, for example, Nernhorn Trait, or listing something like golden glyphs, something that sells in the background while you're doing other things. And finally then we have trading. So this is essentially just flipping things you find on guild traders, so buying an item for a low price, selling it for a high price, or investing in an item and hoping it goes up over time. So as a beginner, what I want you to do is pretty much forget about the trading aspect for the first few weeks of the game. It's something that you're going to learn over time, and it requires a little bit of research and a little bit of base knowledge. So it is hard to get into right away. There's also a risk factor to trading, so you can actually lose money with this if you don't do it correctly or if you pay a little bit too much for something. So what I would recommend is putting this in the back burner and coming back to it after a couple of weeks if you have a little bit more base knowledge of the game. But there are some videos on my channel, quite a lot actually, that go into different ways to trade and make money, so feel free to check those out if you want a bit more information. So let's get started with the main moneymaker, the most profitable and the easiest to get started with, the active money making. So there are a few activities I'd recommend right away for someone who's just fresh into the game and needs a little bit of starting gold. That would essentially be to go mining. So that would be my main priority. You can also go and collect clams if you prefer. That is also pretty much on par with this activity. So I just think these methods are super underrated, and I think you can make a really nice profit even without champion points or leveling your character much or your skill lines. So I would 100% recommend leveling up your skill lines, your blacksmithing, and even gaining some CP in your spare time. If you get sick of doing this method, it's always good because it will help you unlock more profitable moneymakers in the future and help you just progress in the game in general. But if you're just coming in here as a level 3, you want some money, this is perfect. There is an in-depth mining guide if you want to look for that on the channel. I have a link in the description and I'll put a little pop-up on the video now. And if you don't want to do mining and you want to go and look at the clams, it is also equally as profitable in my opinion. And I'll also put another video of how to do that a bit more in depth in the description for you. So this is essentially what you want to be doing over and over again on a rotation until you have enough money for the thing you want, or until you can't be bothered to do this because, let's face it, mining gets a bit boring, and so is picking up clams. So once we have our first hour behind us, what I would do is go and try and sell the materials on a guild trader, try and gather up some coins. Hopefully you'll have around 100k or so by now. And if you do, what I recommend then is to try and start doing some passive money makers in the background as well as doing your active money maker. So to do this, what we want to be doing is taking the materials we just gathered and listing them on a guild trader. If you aren't familiar with guild traders, essentially you just go to the guild finder in game, you find a nice guild that has a nice trader, hopefully in a reasonable location, you apply for that. Usually Deshan, Eldenroot, Wayrest, and Perplexity are the best ones to go for if you want to sell your stuff quickly. So once you're in a guild, you can go to any bank and list your item for sale. You can also just visit that guild trader in its location, but that's a little bit more complex because you have to know where it is. So we want to be selling the raw materials we gathered just to gather the money, and while we're waiting for these to sell initially, we'll go back to our active money maker. Once these raw materials have sold, we'll come back, we'll gather up all the money, and we'll be in a position to start our passive money maker. Now what I would do is probably start out by making some Nernhorn weapons and armor. So really easy, there's always a profit margin on this, and there's always a bit of a demand for this because people are always researching these items. So you can research the Nernhorn really quickly on a new account by using the research scroll to instantly complete this, meaning it takes basically no time to set up. So even if you're a fresh level 3 with pretty much no prep time, you can get this off the ground. So I will leave a more in-depth video on how to do this start to finish in the description, but essentially what you're doing is you're going to go find some random ingots, whatever the lowest tier you can make is. You're going to find some potent Nerncrux if you're making a weapon. It's obtainable through guild stores. You're then going to go and craft a dagger, for example, at an anvil. You then be listing the dagger on a guild trader and just wait for it to sell. You'll generally be making hopefully between 5 to 10k per item, depending on what item you're making. So at this stage, whenever we have our passive moneymaker set up, all we need to do now is just keep repeating the cycle. So we go back to our active moneymaker. Every time we kind of get bored and we want a little break, we come, we list our items on the traders. And every time our passive money making has taken off, so our daggers have sold or whatever we have listed has sold, we'll take a little break, go back to the traders, gather all our money, and sort of just refill the trader with even more stuff. So for example, if we had 1 dagger, now maybe we've got enough money to make 3 daggers. Just keep doing that over and over again until you have like 10, 20 daggers, things like this. So I fully believe that with only around 10 hours of actively playing the game, you'll be able to get your first million coins by just doing these methods. Now, I say 10 hours actively playing, I don't mean 10 hours including you logging on for an hour and then, you know, going to sleep or AFK and things like this. I mean 10 hours if you run your active moneymaker while things sell in the background. And just keep in mind, your first million coins is always the hardest to make, because once you have money, it's easier to make money, because you can then look into flipping and upgrading your materials to do more complex content, things like this. So a bonus tip what I would give to beginners is, obviously you're not going to be doing this all the time from the second you log in to the second you log out, or at least I hope not. So what I would say is to be using price tracking apps or some add-ons if you're on PC, just so you know what the price of all the items you're gathering naturally are. So there's going to be times you're gathering maybe a furnishing plan, or you're gathering maybe a motif from a dungeon, and these can be worth quite a lot of money, and it is always good to make sure you're price checking these before listing them on a guild trader or just learning them yourself. For example, if you've just got the new expansion and you manage to randomly be in the new DLC zone and you pull a purple furnishing, this could be worth 5-10 million coins on day 1, day 2, and if you decide you don't know what it's worth, you're not going to check it, you might be tempted to learn it and pull yourself out of all that profit. That's how I would make money as a beginner. There are hundreds of ways to do it, there are other ways to do it, but this is my guide. If you're just logging in for the first time, you need some seed cash, this is exactly what I would do. Also remember, if you want an in-depth guide on any of the aspects, they are in the description. There are a couple of links there, and I'll also put some pop-ups throughout the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, hopefully you guys make some money. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you next time.